All right, gang. Well, I'm going to try and spend about 19 minutes, maybe 20 minutes here on this entire topic. It's not the funnest topic, it's not the most interesting topic, but it is absolutely relevant. And so we won't spend a long time on it, just 20 minutes to learn about our current context of waste and waste management. One of the major objectives, I think, in this course or in this chapter that I want y'all to get out of is the issue of source. Uh, Trying this source elimination is what this chapter calls it, where not just about management or where it goes or learning about trash, but actually reduction of it, giving how much consumption and how many people we have living in our area. If you go to college, in even a lot of major corporations, you will see these campaigns to reduce waste, do something about it, eliminate it, buy new products. And so this sort of recycle mania that was mentioned in your book may seem a little bit cheesy, but universities, schools, and corporations are very much into this. I got a grant from Coca-Cola to install just those blue recycle bins that you see around our campus. So make sure you understand this first and foremost. A formal, proper technical definition of waste, which is any unwanted material or substance, that's pretty vague. So down below you have several concrete examples of what they're talking about. And this slide coming up right here in just a second about waste definition and waste management is absolutely what the chapter is about. So take good note of that. Make sure you've listed those, you have them in your brain, and that right there is the thesis of the entire chapter. We won't deal so much with wastewater. We've kind of already covered that in a way with runoff, but let's just focus on the solid stuff and the dangerous stuff. So when people talk about waste management, it has to do with either trying to reduce the sheer amount, seeing what can be recycled, which is just a hot mess in this country right now. It's completely disorganized. And then if we can't do that, where do you stick it? It's got to go somewhere, and where do we put it? And so waste stream is not like a river of trash necessarily. It's just about where it's transported, what's done with it, and where it's put. Where does it start and where does it end up? So I think one of the hottest things, one of the most interesting things, if you want to latch on to an idea, is source reduction. This could be everything from just purchasing and consuming less, making things last longer, rather than going for the newest or the latest, though that's good for business. But actually holding on to things, making them stretch, making them last, consuming less, if not reusing them and recycling them. So it used to be cradle to grave. Analysts would track where certain things go in one person's lifetime. The new approach now is cradle to cradle. In other words, what is multi-generational? What can be passed on? Can they make it more durable? Will it last? And if it can't last, then can we repurpose it? Can we compost it? We have a composter in our backyard, and we do pretty heavily recycling in my household. And y'all have learned that small things matter. You reduce something by just 1 or 2%. With how many people do this, it matters greatly, as you can see on this graph, which your book should make a little bit bigger deal about. So it's not about cutting things in half or 99%. If you can just reduce it 1 to 5%, that makes a massive difference. In our own country, since 1960, so what is it, like 60 years ago, we have more than tripled, probably by now, with where this was published in 2015. We have more than tripled the amount of waste that we generate based purely off of consumption. More things are packaged and thrown out, and so it's just through consumption. So that's why I said the source stuff is the most strategic. In developing countries, as they gain affluence, and they will catch up to us, that's for sure. They tend to generate more waste, and so waste, consumption, and riches go hand in hand. So it's all about the modern context of purchasing, consuming, and disposing. We have gotten much better, so I'm never all about bad news. I'm also about good news at improving our waste collection, disposal, and as our waste going to landfills has actually declined. You in Louisville should be very happy about that, right off the highway. I grew up almost, not right next to one, but we knew where it was just like a mile away. I grew up with a landfill right around the corner basically, and that thing has grown over the years. So this matters. It's in all of our communities. Reducing waste at the source, as I've already said, is the best. Little things like reusable plastic bags, grocery bags, things that you can shred, things that you can compost, anything like that, no matter how small, adds up. It works. You should embrace it, and it's fantastic. And so consumers have tried a number of options, and you'll see a number of options get rotated round and round. Any little attempt by 1 to 5% to reduce waste, you'll see that in your purchases in the near future, and you already see some now. Recovering organic waste is a big deal. We compost just about everything we can. Our composter is always full, and we rotate it out. I don't give the city any of my yard clippings or collection. I don't. I shred and mulch and chop up everything in my own yard. I don't give that to the landfill. And so, anyway, composting is great. You should do it in your own backyard. I would hate to have this job. These poor souls going through 80,000 tons of waste and compost that's generated every year. Kudos to them. I'm glad they do. That's an amazing job. I'm just not sure how they do it and what it's like doing that, but there's a snapshot of it. So I know in Louisville, as well as in my community, we have materials recovery facilities, and there's a special place not 3-4 miles away from my house where you have to drop off certain special things like batteries and electronics. And then, of course, all of our recycling goes there. We use blue bags, and they pick them up every Thursday. And they give us free bags just for being a resident. So it's at the cost to the city. And, of course, our taxes support that. But I think it's fantastic. One of the things that people will do is a trash audit. And so I have seen this in our school with those blue recycle bins when you're supposed to put glass or cans in there. And not you guys. It's always the other class. Y'all will throw chip bags and paper and stuff like that in there. So I don't think many people take recycling too seriously and don't understand what the attempt is. So I hope that you would do better in the future. So this map is interesting. It's maybe surprising as well, as if you look at some of the states that are 0 to 10% recycling. There we are in Texas. But even if you go up to the Northeast and the Midwest, certainly through the South, largely recycling not really important to us. But that's kind of a broad brush. I know plenty of individuals here in Dallas who are heavy recyclers. My wife's company, who makes batteries, they do that as well. So market prices often don't reflect the cost of recycling. It can fluctuate. It is expensive. No way around it. To capture trash and recycle it and reuse it again is expensive. All plastic is petroleum based, and so sometimes when oil prices are cheaper like now, it won't do well to recycle for the companies. It's always good for us. Certain states in our country, Texas is not one of them, but they will pay you to bring glass bottles back in, which is pretty cool. It's not much, but they do that with aluminum. As a kid, I collected aluminum cans, crushed them, bagged them, took them down to this place, and I got money for it, which may seem silly, but as a kid, I loved it. So here's your life here in Louisville. If you've seen that Mount Trashmore over there, they basically bury it. You'll see on the next slide how they do it. It's basically like making bricks, cake, putting in layers of dirt in between, banking on the fact that bacteria, fungi, and whatnot will decompose it as much as they can. There are bacteria that can decompose plastic, which is amazing. And then from the sheer amount of weight it crushes down, it releases a lot of bad chemistry, a lot of leached stuff into the soil, into the water, and into the air. And so what you'll find is a lot of these places will have special pipes, special drains, and sometimes, if you've ever seen it, we'll come to it in a minute, you'll see this flame shooting out one corner or two corners of it, which is all basically just straight methane that's being produced. And they're burning it there so that it doesn't collect and explode later. These landfills are insanely hot just because of the level of decomposition and chemistry. So closed landfills, we used to have one of these in Dallas. I actually wanted to take you down to the Trinity River Audubon Center. That whole place looks just like that spot on the left there with all that trash and the seagulls and whatnot. And now it does look like our version of that guy hiking through the field there. The Trinity River Audubon Center is amazing, and it's all built on a trash heap, basically. So we don't really incinerate in the Louisville area where I grew up. There was in Houston, in North Houston, there was a place like that, and it was put way out into the edges of the suburbs, outside of the city. And so there was always, you could see it at night, it was lit up with a big orange flame. But they used that to power turbines and recapture some energy. There's an energy loss there, but it's better to recover some of it, if not all of it. Silly enough, if you've seen Toy Story 3, this is partly how the movie ends, in a trash incinerator. But not so much here in Dallas or Louisville that I know of. I could be wrong, but I'm not familiar with that. So right here is what I was talking about with landfill gas. If bacteria produce methane, they produce methane inside of our bodies when we digest food. They do the same thing out at these landfills. If you don't burn that up in small amounts or collect it or use it, it will explode, and it's very dangerous, if not lethal also, to breathe. And so I'm glad that happens. I don't know if y'all know about copper thieves, if y'all have ever recycled metal and gotten money for it. Like I said, I did as a kid. It's fun to do. It's a little bit, makes you look a little bit silly, but I'll probably have my kid do it. Most landfills try to avoid having heavy metals in their facilities, but it can't be avoided. So when we come to solid waste, industrial level, not you guys, but industrial level, if you consider the amount of production and consumption that goes into building roads, buildings, and whatnot, that is exponentially more than any household will do. But anyway, and it's also expensive for companies to try to alter their methods rather than just consume. And so what the government will do will not only put strict regulations on it, but certain local governments can give incentives for being physically efficient, bonuses for finishing the project early, all because of waste production and waste generation from these projects. So industrial ecology is a field you can go into. It's an integrated field of engineering, chemistry, ecology, like environmentalism, and economics. And so good luck finding that major. It might be present in your universities, but sometimes you just have to make this work and do the right internships and find the right people. But I love jobs like this that integrate a number of fields at the same time. If you don't want to be in the field, you can also be an analyst, and you can just do stats, lab work, chemicals, and design, like fabrication in a lab to make things better. So I think what I'm just trying to show you here is that you can go into this stuff in a couple different avenues and not have to go out there and necessarily collect trash, but you can make the world a better place in these cities. This one's funny. Beer brewers have gotten into this. In Louisville, we have a distillery called Bent, who's they're completely solar. They recapture most of their water, and they reuse the organic products to produce mushrooms and energy for their own facility. So it's right there off of Main Street in downtown Louisville. They make whiskey, but it's a pretty cool place. As far as hazardous stuff goes, here are your categories. I hope that you never have to deal with any of this, but you'll be surprised in just a minute where these hazardous waste come from. Nuclear waste at the very end of this chapter is the least of our concerns locally, but in your own houses, if you have painted anything, if you have old batteries, oils for your machines or inside your house, anything to clean out a pipe, and there it is at the end, pesticides. And so if you see some products out there like soap and sink cleaner and bug spray that are trying to be organic. It's not hippie stuff. This is that lowering things by 1 to 5% to reduce the collection of hazardous chemicals. Heavy metals, which we're about to get into when it comes to electronics, is a major area of concern, as you could imagine. I don't know how many cell phones you've been through just in your own young lifetime, but if you can take everybody in this country who probably has a cell phone and how much the aluminum, magnesium, copper, and silicon, it's not really a metal, but silicon that is in these products gets discarded, and you really can't recycle them effectively because there's such small amounts per device. This creates a major issue. This is probably the issue right now of what to do with old electronics. The EPA has not figured this out, and because of the flame retardant nature of electronics and the low amount of heavy metals that each one has individually, when you combine them together, they become a source of hazardous waste, and no one has figured out exactly what to do with this situation. So there's your real problem right now. I would take one of these metals that were used in the 2010 Winter Olympic Games. They were recycled from old electronics. The precious metals were pulled out. That's a small thing. It's a good example. It's pretty cool. I would gladly take it. But the point is, I think it was a demonstration that if you can make a beautiful metal out of recaptured cell phone metals, just about anything is probably possible. You just have to have some willpower, focus, and some money to pull that off at first. So there were a number of disasters that had to do with hazardous wastes, and which initiated or prompted a lot of these cradle to grave and then cradle to cradle type of approaches to these electronics and hazardous materials. And so right here, this will be the cutting edge. This is the thing you do. I know that there are electronics shredders that drive around, and they'll destroy these things in an attempt to get some of those metals out. In the most extreme conditions or situations, you can have companies that dump hazardous waste just out in the open. There's a lot of regulation, a lot of fines, and a lot of repercussions that can happen with this. Unfortunately, it does happen, yes, in our country. And I would just tell you, because the cost of disposal is so high, as a citizen, just watch out. So a number of things that can be done to avoid this is where you would basically just stick it in the surface, cover it up, protect it, and just let it decompose maybe, but decomposition is an organic process. These are hazardous inorganic materials. The deep well injection reminds me of throwing things into a volcano like we watched earlier in the week, but you can see how risky that is, because if that pipe breaks or is not secure or backs up or returns, that is a massive problem. I can't believe people do this. It's something I learned in this chapter. Bill Gates actually has a major plan of what to do with radioactive waste. He touched on it in one of our videos a while back, but he already has a device, a process, a method for using old radioactive waste for current energy needs that results in the radioactive waste being clean. It's basically just carbon when we're done. Coal, ash, basically. And I think it's fascinating, and if you can find that on TED or YouTube, you should listen to it. It's a really cool program. And so, in our country, Be Happy, since 1980, 40 years ago, through the Superfund, our country is actually very active in cleaning up some of these most dangerous, hazardous sites. And so again, I'm never about just all bad news. I'll also like sharing with you some good things. And so a number of laws have been passed, a number of funding options have been set up, and as of 2016, 1,328 Superfund sites have remained on the national priorities list. Only about 400 have been dealt with, so there's plenty of work to do, but be happy that it is being done. Catch you guys later.